Stamina has been buffed in patch 1.8. They changed the scaling back to 30 health per point of stamina instead of 15. And many players, including myself, are calling this a good change because it allows for more build diversity. However, there's also the other side of the story, and that's the part of the player base that thinks this is a step in the wrong direction because it will make the time to kill in PvP too long, and it will only promote running in circles more and more. Truth be told, guys, both parties are right. With this change, we do have more build diversity, but the PvP time to kill has also increased by quite a lot. And with this video, I kind of want to just talk about it. As usual, I did the numbers, I compared the time to kill that we had in patch 1.7 to the time to kill we have now in patch 1.8 to see if we are really that much more tanky and what we can perhaps do about it, if we would want to do anything about it at all in the first place. Because of course, I'm not saying that the longer time to kill is a bad thing per se, but I'm also not saying it's a good thing. I kind of just want to talk about it with this video. So yeah, what actually happened to stamina in patch 1.8? For those that don't know, it's very, very simple. In 1.8, the amount of health that your character gets from a point of stamina was doubled. In patch 1.7 it was 15, and then in patch 1.8 it is now 30. When the game launched, the scaling per point of stamina was also 30, but then in patch 1.6, for whatever reason, the developers decided to reduce the amount to 15, which also resulted in pretty much everybody ignoring stamina and just going with a firearms or an electronics build instead, or a combination between the two, of course. We have a lot of hybrid builds now. A direct result of this was also that the plus health rolls on gear instantly became best in slot, so to speak, especially the ones on the chest piece, on the knee pads and on the backpack, as they came in quite high amounts, and they were pretty much the only way to increase our character's survivability without giving up on a very high amount of electronics or firearms. But now, with patch 1.8, they reversed that change, stamina is back. So, what does this do for the game and what does it do for PvP? Well, obviously, it is going to make everybody tankier, even those who did not spec into stamina whatsoever. This is because players always have that 3000 or so stamina as a base, that everybody has that by default. But is this new scaling with the stamina really going to make them that much tankier? Does it really make that much of a difference? Well, let's find out. First up, let's take a look at this 3000 stamina build that also has the plus health rolls on the chest piece, on the knee pads and on the backpack. Pretty much the standard stuff for patch 1.7. Now, in patch 1.7 we're getting around 110,000 HP from being in World Tier 5. That's just something we get for free, always. As I said, we have the health rolls on the chest piece, on the backpack and on the knee pads, so we add that up to that initial amount, which gives us around 156,000 HP. And then we add the baseline 3000 stamina that everybody has times 15 because of the older scaling to end up with a total of 201,000 HP. Now, of course, this is only our health, not our toughness. So what we need to do next is add the armor multiplier on top of it. I'm going to assume that we have capped out armor here, which is going to give us 303,000 toughness. And well, that is pretty much what most meta builds in 1.7 have, right? I bet that if you go to a few of your builds right now, the chances are very high that this is going to be your toughness, or it's going to be very close to this amount at least. It's probably not going to be exactly the same. But now, let's take a look at patch 1.8. Again, we have the same story. We get 110,000 HP for free, simply for being in World Tier 5. We take the same health rolls as we previously did, so our health goes up to 156,000. Then we add the baseline 3000 stamina, but because we have the 30 health per point of stamina scaling right now, because we are in patch 1.8, this is actually going to give us more health. So we're now sitting at 246,000 instead of that 201,000, which turns our toughness, after the armor calculation, into 371,000. So even for a player that has not specced into stamina whatsoever, his toughness is going to be increased by around 22.5%. So yeah, even the squishiest players out there, they're going to be at least 22.5% tankier now. 22.5% definitely seems like a lot, and it will definitely help out everybody in PvE, because the NPCs did not get adjusted, but everybody does get tankier, so it's going to make everybody a little more beefy. But before we jump to conclusions on the PvP side of things, we also have to remember that to compensate for the stamina buff, the developers did also change the PvP damage modifier. So if you're shooting another player, you're also going to hit a bit harder no matter the situation. In patch 1.7, the PvP modifier was set to 0.42, meaning that a weapon that originally dealt 10,000 damage per bullet, it would now only hit for 4,200. But then, on the PTS for patch 1.8, this was first changed to 0.46, and then just at the very end of the PTS, it was changed to 0.49. And that 0.49 value is actually the value that made it into the live game. That is a 16 or a 17% increase in damage to compensate for something that on the surface seems to be a 22.5% increase in toughness. That is, if the players would not spec into stamina whatsoever, of course. To get a better perspective of all of this, of how this is going to affect time to kill, I think we have to take a look at our perceived toughness, which is not a stat that you can see in the game, but it's still a stat that we can calculate. It's basically what happens when we put our character's toughness through the PvP multiplier, and that number that we're getting there, that's how tanky you're going to feel in PvP. In patch 1.7, the perceived toughness of our players with our default 3000 stamina build, it would be sitting around 722,000. And in patch 1.8, with the buff to stamina, but also with the increase to the PvP damage modifier, this seems to be sitting, as expected, just above that at 757,000. And again, this number, it is nothing that you can see in the game. It is just your toughness after the PvP modifier. It shows us exactly how tanky we're going to feel in PvP. This value is something that we can look at that will tell us exactly how long the time to kill is going to be. So yeah, looking at this, players that do not spec into stamina whatsoever, they're going to be about 5% tankier than that they were in patch 1.7. And that doesn't sound that bad, right? It's only 5%. What's the big deal? Yeah, except this is when players do not spec into stamina. And players will be speccing into stamina in patch 1.8, because the new scaling is a lot better, so why wouldn't they? I'll give you another example of the two patches, this time with a decent amount of stamina. Let's say that both builds have 6,000. In patch 1.7, this would give the player a toughness of 371,000, given he of course also still takes the plus health rolls on his gear, and that will make his perceived toughness in PvP around 883,000. In patch 1.8, that exact same build with 6,000 stamina and also the health rolls on your gear, it would give the player a toughness of 506,000 and then a perceived toughness in PvP of, well, just over 1 million. Which means that, yeah, if a player specs 6,000 into stamina, he's definitely going to feel that difference. In fact, he's going to feel about 17% tankier going from patch 1.7 to patch 1.8. At 9,000 stamina, of course, the difference is going to be even bigger. In patch 1.7, perceived toughness is going to sit at 1,045,000. And in patch 1.8, the perceived toughness is going to sit at 1.3 million. So at 9,000 stamina, players are going to feel about 25% tankier, give or take a few decimals, of course. Still though, 25%, it doesn't seem like a whole lot, and that's the worst case scenario. It's when somebody specs 9,000 of their main stats into stamina, which is almost everything. If it's only 25%, how is it possible that in patch 1.8 everybody feels so much tankier? It's like every other person walking in the DZ is twice as tanky as that they were in the previous patch. Well, maybe not twice as tanky, but you get what I'm saying, right? It feels as if players are way tankier than 25% extra at best. And well, if you feel that way, you're not wrong. You're actually right. One thing we have to remember is that in patch 1.7 everybody was running with a lot of firearms or electronics on their builds as well. Stamina was just so bad to take that nobody took it, which means that we had to do something else with our main stats. So yeah, in patch 1.7 everybody was running around with either a lot of electronics or a whole lot of firearms. But the moment that we're going to patch 1.8 and everybody's putting parts of their main stats into stamina, well, they're also gonna deal less damage because they have less firearms. So what we have going on here is kind of a double effect. People are getting more tanky because they're speccing into more stamina, but because they're speccing more into stamina, they're speccing less into firearms. And thus they're also dealing less damage. And thus time to kill is actually increased a lot more than 25%. Think about the extreme example of two players that both have 9,000 stamina fighting each other. The time to kill is going to be a lot longer than an extra 25% coming back from patch 1.7. My conclusion is that, yeah, I think that we're a bit too tanky at the moment in PvP. When I saw the new scaling for stamina, when I heard that stamina was finally getting buffed again, I of course also assumed that it would come with a pretty significant increase to the PvP damage modifier. At least to a point where not speccing into stamina at all would result in a lower perceived toughness when it comes down to PvP in patch 1.8. Now I know that one counter argument that some people might have is that the developers released all these powerful gear sets, the 6 pieces, that could bring a lot of damage to the table. And that's going to compensate for the increased toughness that everybody's running around with. Final Measure is suddenly going to give the whole team a 40% damage buff when he defuses a grenade. Lone Star suddenly gets 30% extra damage and 30% rate of fire on the weapons once you proc it. And well, let's not even talk about some of the other gear sets out there. So yeah, if you're saying that classified gear is going to provide more damage to the players, you are probably right to some extent. But I also don't think that you can just rely on the classified gear to balance out the PvP time to kill, because it also means that if there's anybody that doesn't have a solid 6-piece build, he is going to have a horrible time in PvP because he's not going to have the damage to kill anything. Now, I'm not saying that 6 pieces are super hard to get, but it's definitely going to raise the entry barrier to PvP for newer players as well, which is exactly the opposite of what you were trying to achieve. At least, that's the feeling I got when you nerfed headshot damage in patch 1.6. And also, if we're going to use the whole classified gear gives more damage argument, then I also think that we should look at it from the other side, because classified gear doesn't just give more damage, it also gives a whole lot of survivability. Think about Nomad, for example, which gives you a free health bar with a whole lot of damage resilience every 4 minutes if you're about to die. Think about Final Measure again, which can give you a big armor buff as well instead of the damage buff. Think of Defense, which can give you a very big armor buff as well. Think about Strikers, where you can spec 9,000 of your main stats into stamina, get really tanky, and then also receive a lot of healing from it. Think about Predator's Mark, where the player is basically required to run a 9,000 stamina build around it. You can't just say, oh, but we buffed Lone Star, it does more damage now, so the time to kill will be fine, if you also buff the other things that give players more survivability. If I were the developers, I would slowly start to increase the PvP modifier week by week until the general opinion tells you that PvP feels good. This is a pretty easy thing to do, I believe, and you can do this on the server side as well during the weekly maintenance, because you also did that for the last week on the PTS. The last couple of days of the PTS, you increased the PvP damage modifier as well without dropping a client update. So is this longer time to kill something that we can't fix? No, absolutely not. It's actually a very easy fix. It's just a couple of numbers just until we get it right. But that's why I wanted to make this video. You know, show you some numbers, show you the comparison to patch 1.7, and just make sure that everybody is talking about it, I guess. But yeah, that's all that I have to say. That's going to wrap up things for this video. If you have any questions left, you know, you can just hit me up, you know where to find me. And as always, I will see you guys later. Or, like they say in the Netherlands, zie je later.